Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. The conflict in Ukraine enters a critical phase as US, Ukrainian and Russian negotiators meet in Abu Dhabi to discuss peace, territory and security guarantees, while Russian airstrikes plunge Kyiv and other cities into a severe energy crisis. Joining us to unpack the latest developments is Olena Lennon, Assistant Professor at the Department of National Security at the University of New Haven. Professor, welcome back to TVP World. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we've had these talks in Abu Dhabi, trilateral talks. They've just wrapped up today, on Saturday. Your initial thoughts on what was discussed? There seems to be quite, some quite positive messages coming out of that. What are you hearing?
Well, I didn't have high hopes, despite the fact that this is the first time that representatives of Russia, Ukraine, and the United States sat down at the same table, in the last 4 years, mainly because nothing has changed on the battlefield, and the Russians have continued launching massive airstrikes in Ukraine, including last night. But also the environment, the security environment has changed in Russia's favor as well. The developments in Venezuela, but also Trump's, the developments around Greenland and his speech in Davos, all those things together have created a security environment that pretty much reinforced this idea that great powers do whatever they want, and that post-World War II order is defunct, and that European security is now is really threatened by the rise of authoritarianism. So I think in this new security environment, there's absolutely no incentive for Russia to make concessions or to cooperate. And I think that the main target audience of these talks was the United States. The Russians are trying to show to the Trump administration that they are pursuing a diplomatic solution here, that they're still willing to negotiate something, and that they're interested in peace, even though the true motivation of these peace talks was to delay time and to avoid sanctions. It's basically just to show to the United States that the Russians are working toward a peace agreement. So unfortunately, I didn't have high hopes, and I think that again, these talks were mainly for the show to signal to the United States that that diplomatic solution may still have a chance. Much like Trump would prefer it. The only aspect where I thought progress could be possible, given that the talks included the chief of military intelligence on the Russian side, Kostukov, and the former chief of military intelligence, Budanov, on the Ukrainian side. To me, that signaled that the two sides could be negotiating, perhaps reducing strikes on energy infrastructure, that the Russians and Ukrainians would agree to coordinate their strikes in such a way as to minimize strikes on energy infrastructure. So that I think but that's more of a tactical development, not any strategic progress.
Well, I mean, what incentive would Russia have then to stop strikes on civilian energy infrastructure, given what you've just said, that they're just, it's just a little play here for the benefit of the United States? Why would Russia even consider such a conversation?
Well, I think that a lot has changed on the Ukrainian side in terms of Ukraine now has developed long-range capabilities of their own, both unmanned systems, but also ground-based systems and missiles, to where they can leverage their long-range strikes against Russia and put pressure on Russia. So the Russians are responding to the pressure of Ukraine's long-range strikes on Russian military targets, but also energy infrastructure. So Ukrainians have now closed that, or they have, at least to a degree, closed the capabilities gap with which the Russians have launched this invasion. So, Ukrainians have, in the past 4 years, adapted and innovated to the extent to where they are moving toward being a near-peer competitor to Russia when it comes to specifically drone capabilities. And the Russians are feeling that pressure. So, but like you said, these are all tactical maneuvers, right? So the political objectives remain the same. And I think that the fact that the Russians sent military leaders to UAE, to Abu Dhabi, signals that those people are there to discuss, tactical maneuvering and, kind of tit for tat negotiations that could potentially buy Russia more time. But political leadership remains unengaged, and that means that political objectives remain the same. But the fact that Russia is feeling the pressure from Ukraine's drone and missile strikes is real.
Right. Okay. Now, let me just take you back to Davos for a second. Both President Zelensky and President Trump had a meeting, and their feedback was pretty positive. I mean, President Zelensky called it constructive. President Trump called it terrific. What do you think made them both feel that way then?
Well, I think President Zelensky doesn't have a choice, but he has to. He's desperate to keep the U.S. on Ukraine's side. Obviously the signals from Trump's administration are such that he's less and less interested in sustaining Ukraine in this fight. He really wants the war to end and move on to other things. So Zelensky has to step up his diplomatic game and appease Trump in this way. I wouldn't say that things necessarily went well for Ukraine in Davos, because I think this is really a moment of weakness for Europe. NATO and the European Union have never been more challenged in this current security environment, was Trump threatening the invasion of Greenland, a NATO member. So I think this is a real moment of vulnerability for the entire European continent, and Ukraine as an integral part of that. And not to mention a Board of Peace, which is, in no obscure terms, very much has turned into an autocrat club. Not very well represented by European powers, but a lot of autocratic regimes are included in Trump's new, club of peace-loving authoritarian regimes. So, the signals from Davos, unfortunately, the optics of friendship and cooperation were there, but the decisions that were made and the proclamations that were made in Davos, unfortunately, don't look very optimistic for Europe. And Europe is increasingly alone in its support of Ukraine and in its fight for European security without the United States.
Do you think this is an opportunity for the European Union and other countries such as Canada, for example, and Australia, to actually come together in a way that Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada suggested that middle power countries should, to form a sort of self-reliant bloc when it comes to security and defence?
It's not just an opportunity. They don't have a choice. This is the only thing that Europeans and Canadians should be doing right now. And in some ways, and it's too little too late, Ukraine has bought Europe at least 4 years of increasing their readiness and improving their strategic autonomy and stepping up their defense production. And now we're in the moment where things have stacked up over the last 4 years, and to where it's no longer a choice. It's a must. So Europe doesn't have a choice anymore. They have to spend more on defense. They have to configure some type of a security assurance initiative for Ukraine. The coalition of the willing should also be prepared to send a small contingent of forces, peacekeeping forces, to Ukraine at some point. The UK and France at a Paris meeting earlier this year indicated that they're willing, they're preparing to do so as long as they have American intelligence and logistics support, which I think they will. So I think the Europeans are being clear-eyed about what they must do to protect their interests, to protect their economies, to protect their physical security, because it's no longer hypothetical that the U.S. May not be a reliable ally. Because the reality is that the U.S. has not acted in good faith in the last year, and there is absolutely, the Europeans would be wiser and smarter to not waste time and really step up defense production and support for Ukraine.
Right, indeed. And in fact, although we're running out of time now, very, very quickly, in the Trilateral meeting, they were talking about security guarantees, but surely we can't have security guarantees without a peace deal first. Your initial feeling that, some kind of peace deal is going to be thrashed out in Abu Dhabi?
I don't think that that's in the cards at all. I think that, like I said, the most realistic scenario of Abu Dhabi is reducing strikes on energy infrastructure, because Ukraine really needs a break from energy strikes on energy infrastructure and allow people to recover from this brutal winter. And I think exchanges of prisoners are always a good outcome and realistic outcome. So the most that I would expect from these talks are, reduction of strikes on energy infrastructure and exchanges of prisoners. But unfortunately, the rest is just buying time.
So the security guarantees are a little bit redundant at the moment. Professor Olena Lennon, thank you very much, as always, for sharing your analysis with our audience. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away. World News coming right up. Goodbye.